So you finally got pedals for Star Citizen, but every time you put one input, adding the second input causes all inputs to stop functioning. Well, today I'm here to help you solve that issue. Now, if you're not sure if this is something that happens to you, this is what you're looking for. Start by pressing the Windows key on your keyboard or just navigate to the Start menu. From here, we're going to type USB. You should now see Set up USB game controllers. Once there, we're going to look for our pedals. For me, it's the T pedals. This is going to vary depending on what you're using, but it's going to be the same process. We're going to open Properties. You can press your pedals to make sure everything is working, but what we're looking for is a separation of axis. For example, if your pedal only has one axis but two inputs, then you don't need this setup at all. But if you're like me and your pedal has multiple axes, in this case I have 3, an accelerator, a brake, and a clutch, I want to merge both these axes so that they work as one independent axis. So to get this up and running, we're going to need 2 programs. The first one is Joystick Gremlin, and the second is VJoy. I'll have them both linked below in the description box for you to find them more easily. There will also be more information down there, such as what kind of equipment I'm using for my setup, and more tutorials for you if you're a Star Citizen player. The first thing we need to do is download both Joystick Gremlin and VJoy. For Joystick Gremlin, navigate to the download section, then download the MSI file. Once downloaded, just run the installer, which is pretty straightforward and simple. Next, we'll go and download VJoy. This one only comes in exe format. Once downloaded, just run the installer and go through it. The only thing you don't have to install in this packet is the companion tools. Now that both programs are installed, we need to restart our computer. Don't skip this process, as skipping it will cause some of the functions to not work properly. We're going to open up Joystick Gremlin. But before we do any of the binding, we're going to go to Tools, Options, then make sure that these options are selected. Highlight currently used input, closing minimizes to system tray, activate profile on launch, start Joystick Gremlin minimized, and start Joystick Gremlin with Windows. This last option may not work, as Joystick Gremlin seems to hate starting up with Task Scheduler. Now let's go a little bit over how Joystick Gremlin works and how we can program it to work for us. On the top tab, you'll see a list of all the devices that are plugged into your computer. VJoy device number 1 is the device that we installed earlier to make a virtual joystick. We're going to navigate to our pedals. From here, you'll see all your inputs that are available on your pedals. When you press your pedals, you will see the keys highlighted that are being used. What we want to do is find what 2 pedals you want to use for your forward and back thrust. For me, it's these 2 pedals. From here, we're going to go to Actions, and we're going to merge axis. Then we're going to hit New Axis. You're going to select your lower half, which will be your pedals, and your upper half, again your pedals. From here, we're going to select the correct axes indicated on the left-hand side. For me, it's Z rotation and slider. Then on VJoy's device 1, we're going to select the input that we want to convert both of these halves into as one. I like to use slider. Once you're done, make sure to close out. Next, we're going to create a one-to-one mapping. Once you create the mapping, it's going to do it for all the bindings on that pedal. Just navigate back to your pedals, and you'll now see numbers next to each axis. Now we have to tell Joystick Gremlin which 2 axes are being used together. Remember that depending on your pedals, your axis names may be different, so you have to go by what you set up. If you forgot which one is which, you can press your pedals again to have it highlight which ones we're working with. Now we're going to change both of those axes on the VJoy device to be the same thing. And again, we want to use slider. If you have a third pedal like I do, or any other axes on here, we're going to navigate to those axes and we're going to delete the remapping by closing out the remap. Now that there is no number next to it, those are no longer merged with the other pedals. From here, we're going to go to File and Save As. Here you can name it whatever you'd like and save it. Once saved, all that's left to do is to make sure that the bindings are activated. To do this, just click on the gamepad icon on the top. Once it's green, you're good to go. I have one more tip for you here, and that's adding a modifier to your joystick. If you have no interest in this, just make sure to check the timeline below to skip forward ahead to the ending, where I'll be showing you how to bind this correctly to your game. I personally highly recommend using a modifier, as it doubles the amount of inputs you have available to you in the game. We're going to navigate to our left-handed stick. In here, you can find a button that you feel comfortable using. I personally recommend using the trigger button. Once you locate which button is your trigger key, we're going to make sure it's selected, and then we're going to go to Remap and change it to Map to Keyboard. Then we're going to hit Add. Once added, we're going to click where it says Record Keys. From here, we select whatever key we want as a modifier. I recommend using right Alt. You can use right Control, but I have found that sometimes right Control doesn't like to be recognized by Star Citizen for some reason. From here on, just hit File, and then save your profile. What this is telling your joystick is every time you press the trigger button, you're pressing right Alt on your keyboard. This means that if I were to map something in Star Citizen, I can hold my trigger on my left stick, then press any other button on the joystick, and I'll get 2 inputs instead of 1. If it's working properly, when you bind anything inside Star Citizen, it will say right Alt and then whatever key combination you press afterwards. Now that we have all the settings out of the way, let's navigate into Star Citizen and look at some key mappings to get an idea of how this functions. Just open up your menu and go to Options. In Options, we're going to go to Key Bindings, then swap it to Joystick/HOTAS and go to Advanced Control Customization. Then we'll go to Flight Movement. An important thing to note, whenever you make any binding in Star Citizen, the input will always have an input number registered to that input. This is going to be important to later identify which HOTAS we're working with. For example, if you look at my strafe up and down, it says Y-axis, input 2. This is my left-hand stick. If you see throttle forward and back, I have it set as slider 1. Because it has no input name next to it, it is input number 1. Now let's map your throttle forward and back. Just double click on here and then move your pedal till it says the correct key and hold it there. Once the timer runs out, it will bind to that slider. As an extra tip, we can navigate to on foot all and bind move forward and back to that same pedal. This will allow you to test your pedal in-game without having to jump into a ship. Just press your pedals and see if they function. If they do, but they are inverted, then let's fix that. We can navigate back to Options, then Controls. This is where knowing which input is what number is important. If you navigate through the bottom right, you'll see that there's a bunch of different inputs. For me, my pedal is HOTAS 1. This may be different for you. We'll now go to Inversion Settings, On Foot, FPS Movement, and then forward and back toggle yes or no, depending on what you have. Then we just need to do the same for flight movement forward and back. Test your pedals again, and you should be good to go. If not, you probably selected the wrong HOTAS setting on the bottom right. Just try to identify which is the correct number and try again. The last thing I want to show you pertains to that tip you may or may not have skipped. This has to do with modifiers. I'm going to show you how modifiers work. If we go back to Options and Key Bindings and navigate to HOTAS, let's just say we're doing countermeasures, and I want my flare button to be the same as my decoy button. All I would have to do is bind the flare button. Once the flare is bound, I can go to Noise, and now while holding my modifier key, I will press the same key that I did for my flares. You will now see the same button registered on flares and noise, but you'll see left alt adjusted on one of those key bindings. This is how you set modifier key bindings. Thanks for watching the video, and if you want to catch me on Twitch, check the description box below. With that being said, that's it for this video, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.